Well, hello, that's me again. It is the September 20, and let's not put things away for too long. Let's get, so to speak, to our goats. And we will start with obvious, well, they're not really huge news. There's nothing really huge about it because for anybody who was following Russian media for the last few months, they already knew it was coming. It was discussed and was being discussed so often on so many occasions that it's no surprise that basically four Ukraine's oblasts regions, namely obviously already recognized Donbass republics, which is Lugansk and Donetsk, and Kherson and Zaporozhye Oblast will be holding the referenda between the 23rd and 27th of September on joining Russian Federation as the subjects, administrative subjects, which they will become the oblast or regions of Russian Federation. And for people who really study Russia, not all those hacks who pretend that they know Russia and sell their bullshit, you know, as their expertise, reality, of course, is very simple. Vladimir Putin, or let's put it this way, collective Putin, Putin and people around him, you may recognize already that he, Vladimir Putin, is a huge legalist. The guy is not just, you know, top-notch, basically, intelligence person, you know, and the guy who was a spy, essentially. But he's also a lawyer, and serious lawyer at that. And whatever he does it in such a way that there is a constitution, there is a Russian legislature, there are all kinds of other laws and other acts, or what's called law acts in Russia, which define pretty much all procedures related to the control and command, so to speak, of the state of Russia and whatever the external threats and external interests Russian Federation has. So in this particular case, this is absolutely nothing unexpected, and the speed with which those referenda will be held, and after that, I'm pretty sure it's already have been in the news, State Duma, both chambers actually, Federation Council and Duma itself, they basically will vote it, and those entities and those former Ukrainian territories will become the part of Russia on a full, you know, legal base. That, of course, in itself basically changes the whole game. And the reason it changes the whole game, because at that stage, and it is obvious, it's kind of goes without saying, the attacks of Ukrainian troops on all those four new subjects of Russian Federation will be attacks on Russia. And I'm not talking about those, you know, periodic venturing and shooting couple, three, basically shells at, let's say, some village in Belgorod or Kursk area. No, we're talking about basically everything what Ukraine has been thrown at the territories which are Russian territory. And that means war, guys. And the war means, obviously, the fact that, as already have been stated, and I'm writing this from the start of the special military operation, and I discussed it in many, over many different platforms, and including in Russian language too, for those people who follow me in Russian, especially my discussions on Politico with my friend Vladimir Trukhan, the colonel of the central apparatus of Russian Ministry of Defense. War is a little bit different because it's all well defined in the Russian military doctrine, and those people who really studied Russian military doctrine, and I'm talking about studying it, not reading it over, browsing it as the primarily Western journalists do, they will notice, and they're all criteria about how you defend Russia's national interest and especially Russian territory. And that means that basically those who are in Ukraine, which remains, they really have to start thinking really hard because as you remember, a week or so ago, Russia kind of demonstrated it a little bit in within the 24-hour, turning off the lights pretty much across the whole, not the whole, but most of the Ukraine. But now, because Ukraine becomes an aggressor as a state, before that it was not. But now Ukraine becomes an aggressor as a state. That means the state attacks Russia. Well, you understand what that means, obviously. So, and that is why when people say, and there's a lot of discussion about it, but what does it mean then when Putin and other people say that we didn't even we haven't started yet? That's what it means, and Putin and the team of the people, Russian government, are very deliberate people. They do things as they plan, and they have planned for pretty much any contingency, and this is what we have today. So, and again, I warned about it, many people warned, and I'm talking about people who understand what Russian state is. I'm not pretending to know all of it by far, but what I'm saying is I know Russian strategic culture, if you know what reference I'm making here about this Rebecca Kerfler clown. But so, and this is what we may expect now, so count your days. Obviously there will be very, very intense, big intensification, so to speak, of the shelling and attacks on the civilians and civilian infrastructure in those areas by Ukraine. But we already know that basically in Kherson, the Ukrainian offensive was completely obliterated, basically, with catastrophic losses. Around Kharkov, as I already stated, the latest data, and it was several days ago, we're looking at about 10,000 killed and who knows how many tens of thousands of wounded. So basically, Ukraine is throwing, well, not Ukraine really, NATO, and primarily United States and UK, throwing everything they got now at those nasty Ruskies and Donbass republics, and here it is. Here's the change in the situation, and obviously it will, as I already stated, the old aims, national aims of Russia will be achieved. So this is what I wanted to open with today, and let's now go to a little bit to the other, so to speak, issues, which are very important. And here's what I want to start with, and yeah, it's a military porn, honestly, guys. And this is for all those fanboys who love those shiny military toys, and they love to talk about tactics and all that. So what we have is the stream in the last 2 days of the news of such nature as like this. For example, SRT reports, and it reports yesterday that US tanks absolutely on the table for Ukraine, Pentagon states. As you might expect, people who state that are anonymous. There are some functionaries. We will never know their names because they never are disclosed, which means that actually those media outlets who report that, they may, very often they just make this shit up and just, you know, fantasize about it. But here it is. Speaking to reporters at an anonymous briefing on Monday, the defense staffer was asked whether the White House was considering heavy armor in future aid packages to Ukraine. And yeah, obviously you have all those Ukraine so-called lawmakers visiting the United States begging for everything they can. And here's this staffer. I don't know who the staffer is. Then he says, tanks are absolutely on the table along with other areas, the official said, noting that while Ukrainian troops are more familiar with Soviet-type tanks, the Pentagon recognizes that there will be a day when they may want to transition and may need to transition to NATO-compatible models. Sure, there might be a day at some point of time, and as if that wasn't enough, today, and again, RT, citing Politico, reports the other thing. So, but this one is actually kind of in negative connotation. Ukraine unlikely to get US F-16s soon. Politico. Well, that means, well, sometime in the future, the same as those tanks. And here it is. According to Politico, the hacker, who is the US Air Force in Europe, the general chief of that, he commands the air forces in Europe, according to him, put the delay down to logistical and training issues, but said he believed that Ukraine could get the US-made warplane sometime in the future because folks are starting to think more long-term. The outlet reported last week that the US government was considering sending F-16s and Patriot long-range anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine, expecting that the conflict with Russia would last for years. Well, let me explain what we're having here. Unless you are some NATO fanboy who gets your education from the Top Gun, the Maverick, reality is American and Western military technology performed dismally. And when people say that, oh, they were considering sending US Patriot missiles and air defense complexes, they're considering sending M1M Abrams tanks, or they consider sending F-16, let me tell you, most likely they will not. And this has nothing to do with all those, fluffy rhetoric, militant rhetoric from the Pentagon or State Department. It has everything to do with the fact that they do not need more humiliation because, as you might expect, Russians will not hesitate to show how they obliterate M1 Abrams tanks or Patriot missiles or F-16s because there is, not to mention the fact that whoever talks about the training, let me put it this way, for the pilot who trained, I don't think Ukraine has very many of them left, but even let me put it this way. For the pilot who trained in the Soviet or post-Soviet combat aircraft academy or Air Force Academy, it won't take many years to train on something like F-16. If you flew really well, MiG-29 or Su-27 even, it won't take years for you to requalify for F-16. It probably will take about, well, several months. You need to acquaint yourself with the real, basically what is combat informational control systems and sensors. But other than flying the combat aircraft between, let's say, MiG-29 and F-16, I mean, for basically experienced pilot, especially with a serious academic background from the Air Force Academy, it will take a few months really to get used to F-16. So, but of course, if you are the guy who is just from the street, and there are very few real pilots left in Ukraine, so yeah, that will take many years. But that's the whole thing, it's the famous fable about the either Khan or Jackass, who either of them will die. But it's an Oriental fable or tale, and you can look it up on the internet. But the point is, they can promise anything. But as I already stated, fundamental issue here is that they do not want to be embarrassed by the subpar, absolutely subpar performance of the NATO Western general weapon systems, which obviously always promoted and marketed as Wunderwaffe, while in reality they really are not that good for the real combat in peer-to-peer or peer-to-better-than-peer competition or war. And that is simple like as that. So, and I don't think so this is going to happen, but if it's going to happen, Russians will be happy to oblige and to show how this is being obliterated. After all, as you can see, as you can check yourself in the media, Pentagon vehemently denies that any HIMARS have been, destroyed. The fact is, many of them have been destroyed. And again, if you look at the Russian air defense operations, which are wowzer, and those people who didn't lose the last bits of their integrity and honesty in Pentagon, they know this. The fact that HIMARS missiles are being intercepted constantly by a number of Russian air defense complexes and consistently, it tells you something. But this is not just all of it. And you have to understand that, especially now that we have this morning confirmation of the referenda, and people who have at least half-brain, they understand what's coming after that. So we have to look at this. And I deliberately took it from the website of the, well, oil price. And it's actually news as reported by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which is basically propaganda outlet by CIA and MI6. But they report on yesterday that China and Russia eye further military cooperation. And they say that Russian Security Council claimed Moscow and Beijing agreed on further military cooperation. The reason it is important is because Mr. Patrushev, mighty Mr. Patrushev, the Secretary of Russia Security Council, is currently in Beijing, and he is talking to big honchos in Beijing about how this cooperation will proceed. And this cooperation will proceed, we already know, by furthering the cooperation between general staffs of Russian armed forces, Ministry of Defense, and obviously Chinese, including increase in the not only contacts, there are already very serious contacts, but also increasing in terms of the training, joint maneuvers, joint patrols, joint what have you. And I think so we're going to be seeing much more, a lot more of Russian technology being sold to China, and China does need it. And I will make probably a separate video about this. And I want, though, to inform immediately, I do not pretend to be the sinologist. I'm not a specialist in China per se. I don't speak Chinese language, and I rely usually on the opinions of other scholars on the issue. But there is something we can talk about the Russian-Chinese cooperation in military field, and this cooperation is very, very indicative of the so to speak, separation of labor, if you wish, or how the roles are distributed within this duality of or dyadic relations between Russia and China, in which Russia leading these relations in military, political, geopolitical sphere. And we will be talking about it, but not right now. But fact is, Mr. Patrushev is in Beijing now, and obviously he is not just talking about more contacts or more common joint exercises or maneuvers or actual combat patrols. There will be obviously talk about actually some kind of military integration, and that means a lot of Russian technology. Which one, I don't know. I can only provide a hypothesis or speculate on this matter, but I expect more of it going to China. Which brings us also to the next thing, and as I already stated, there are certainly some American military professionals who still retain actually the realist view on the events, and they try to comment as much as they can. And here we have that Vice Admiral Carl Thomas, the commander of the 7th Fleet, and he is saying that basically Beijing has built a large and modern fleet and can encircle the island, meaning Taiwan, if it wishes to do so. And as he, I'm quoting him, the admiral says that he's speaking to Wall Street Journal, they have a very large navy, and if they want to bully and put ships around Taiwan, they very much can do that, the admiral said. And that's what he is speaking about when he talks about the kinetic situation, because obviously the blockade is less kinetic, albeit it's the act of war. For example, if the US Navy, and the US Navy remains one of the really few truly capable, albeit declining forces in the US inventory, so to speak, of the foreign policy tools. But if for example, US Navy will try to blockade anything in Russia, everybody knows it's the war. But it is one thing when the two superpowers go at it totally. Another one, for example, China, can basically provide or establish the naval blockade for Taiwan, because obviously, despite the fact that Mr. Biden promised to defend Taiwan in case of war, and he immediately confirmed, and then White House needed to make clarification that the United States still supports one China policy. It just merely demonstrates to you the schizophrenia, basically, of bipolar nature of the U.S. foreign policy. But truth is, obviously, China, if it desires, so to speak, and if it decides to establish the naval blockade around Taiwan, it's not the same as if the United States tries to blockade something in Russia. Obviously, it's going to be China acting from the legal point of view or semi-legal point of view against its own territory, and that changes everything. And that is why Admiral, to his greatest credit, he stated that if they impose blockade, yeah, we need to go to the international community and start talking. And you know what? I applaud him for that, because this is the only way you do things. You do go and to the international community and you negotiate. You talk. You don't threaten. You try to solve issues. As, for example, that what happened in Samarkand a few days ago. And the significance of this, basically, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, I cannot even emphasize enough what was happening. Many people don't understand that the alternative system of the international relations have been built, essentially, which removes the UN as it exists now from the fundamental, representation of the international community. And of course, we have now the many countries which are really willing, badly actually, to join the Shanghai Organization. And to give you one sort of hint about it, and you should know about it, Hungary was represented at Samarkand with a large delegation, which was making contacts and talking to everybody, both in official capacity and basically on the sidelines of this summit, from Russians to Chinese to India, and you know what, make your own conclusion what is going on. But we already know what is going to happen now that the referendum will be held in those 4 oblasts or regions of Ukraine. And when you look attentively at what even this admiral says, you know what, I applaud him. This is really common sense. That's the only way to do it. Diplomacy has to rule. And the military options and the threats and blackmailing has to be removed from the actually international arena. But yeah, try to explain it to State Department and try to explain it to the White House, which still thinks that, the American economy is great, there is no inflation and what have you. But speaking of which, and as I already stated, we can talk about it all the time, that, practically everything they talk about economy, and I spoke about it in last video, that it's basically all fake. Reality, of course, is that even the stock market, however detached from the real economy, is not performing that well. Let's put it this way. Well, it's declined, so let's put it that way. But here it is. This is one of the things which people need to consider too. Look at this. Yesterday, and people talk about, and I know the problem firsthand, not because, no, we own the house, but what I know other people, and some of the people from my former work, who had issues with even renting some shitty apartment because they couldn't afford them. And they were working in the aerospace industry, guys. So here it is, and here's the news. That housing, priced out home buyers add pressure to skyrocketing rents. Rents were skyrocketing, and while they give you obviously the, the average things, here is something which really matters in the markets which have even strong jobs. Look at this. Asking rents have risen more than 30% in some of the 50 largest markets, Redfin said, and they will continue to increase in markets with strong job growth and limited housing construction. Let me translate it to you into the layman terms. The strong jobs markets are the markets where you can get the job for the $17 an hour, which doesn't pay anything really, and they will continue to grow in those markets. And you cannot build much today anyway because of the inflation, because of the huge increase in the costs and the prices of the materials and, you know, things of this nature which you need for building the house. As the result, the house prices are growing, and they will continue to grow, even despite the fact that we have now the base rate which is through the roof, and it's also going to grow. In other words, yes, we're looking at the situation when people will be, well, there is already the movement of the small house, you know, owners who buy themselves those tiny little 300 to 150 square feet houses and live in that because they cannot afford anything more. And even those things are very expensive. And it will get even worse. And many people will be left literally on the street. And I'm not talking about those homeless or mentally challenged people. I'm talking about people with the jobs. And there are plenty, if you go over even the YouTube, you will see many hardworking people of all ethnicities and races, white, black, Asian, who work, have an honest day, you know, day work, who make money, who make something like $30,000 a year, maybe 35, and they cannot afford literally shit. They cannot rent anything, let alone buy anything, especially in the markets where they have this job. Because if they go somewhere else where there are no jobs, some prices will, for the real estate will be lower somewhat. But if you don't have a job, what good does it to you? So, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about today, and I will be talking more in coming days about the situation with the referenda, and we might expect, I'm not saying that it will be 100%, but we will see. Well, actually, we're already seeing it, the change in the military pattern, because I think so now Russian army will begin to play much more prominent role on the ground, unlike it was today, prior to this, where the Donbass militias were doing a bulk of fighting in Donbass. I mean Lugansk and Donetsk district and Oblast. So this is my talk for you guys today, and as always, those who can afford, please support me on Patreon, and those who like my channel and what I do, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate your help, guys, and I'll be talking to you later. Have a nice of the rest of the week. I'll talk to you. Bye bye.